Have you ever felt like you were being watched? Not just a passing glance, but a lingering, predatory stare that sends chills down your spine. This story comes from a woman named Sarah who lived in a small, isolated house deep in the woods. It's a story that still haunts her to this day, and one that will leave you questioning what's really out there in the dark. Sarah had always loved the peace and quiet of her little cabin. It was miles from the nearest town, surrounded by nothing but trees and the occasional sound of wildlife. But that peace was shattered one autumn evening when she started noticing things. Small things at first. A footprint in the mud outside her kitchen window. A faint tapping sound on the glass late at night. She told herself it was just the wind or maybe a curious animal, but deep down she knew something wasn't right. One night, Sarah was sitting in her living room, reading by the light of a single lamp. The woods outside were pitch black, the kind of darkness that feels almost suffocating. That's when she heard it, a soft, rhythmic knocking on her front door. Not the loud, urgent knock of someone in need, but something slower, almost deliberate. Her heart raced as she froze in her chair. Who could be out there at this hour, and why weren't they saying anything? Sarah crept to the door, her hands trembling as she peered through the peephole. At first she saw nothing but darkness. Then slowly a face came into view. It was a man, his features obscured by the shadows. But she could see his eyes, wide, unblinking, and fixed directly on her. She stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. When she looked again, he was gone. Over the next few days, the incidents escalated. Sarah would wake up to find her back door slightly ajar, even though she was sure she'd locked it. She'd hear footsteps circling the house at night, slow and deliberate, as if someone was pacing. And then there were the whispers, faint, indistinct murmurs that seemed to come from just outside her windows. She called the police, but they found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, just nothing. The final straw came one night when Sarah was alone in her bedroom. She had just turned off the lights when she heard it, a soft, almost melodic humming coming from outside her window. It was low and haunting, like a lullaby sung by someone who didn't quite know the words. Her blood ran cold as she realized the sound was moving, circling the house. She grabbed her phone and called the police. But by the time they arrived, the humming had stopped. Once again, they found nothing. Sarah moved out of the cabin shortly after that. She couldn't shake the feeling that whoever, or whatever, was out there wasn't done with her. To this day, she refuses to go back. The police never found any evidence of an intruder, but Sarah knows what she saw, what she heard, and sometimes late at night she still hears that humming in her dreams. Was it a stalker, a figment of her imagination, or something far more sinister? We may never know. But one thing's for sure, Sarah's story is a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying things are the ones we can't explain. Lock your doors tonight. You never know who or what might be watching. This next story comes from a man named Mark, who lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It's a place where everyone knows each other, where nothing ever happens until it does. Mark's story begins on an ordinary Tuesday night, but it ends in a way that still keeps him awake at night. Mark had just gotten home from work late that night. He was exhausted, barely paying attention as he unlocked his front door and stepped inside. But as he closed the door behind him, he froze. There, at the end of the hallway, was a figure. It was tall, silhouetted against the dim light from the kitchen. Mark's heart stopped. He hadn't turned on any lights yet, so why was the kitchen light on? Mark stood there paralyzed as the figure turned its head slowly toward him. He couldn't make out any features, just a shadowy outline, and then it started moving. Not toward him, but sideways, slipping into the living room. Mark's mind raced. Was this a burglar? A hallucination? He grabbed a baseball bat from the hallway closet and crept forward, his heart pounding in his ears. When he reached the living room, it was empty. The kitchen light was off and there was no sign of anyone. Mark searched the entire house, but he found nothing. No open windows, no unlocked doors, just silence. He told himself it was just his imagination, but deep down he knew better, because as he turned to go back to the hallway, he saw it, a single muddy footprint on the carpet leading toward the front door. Mark called the police, but they found no evidence of an intruder. The footprint was gone by the time they arrived, and the neighbors hadn't seen anything unusual. To this day, Mark doesn't know who or what was in his house that night, but he's never forgotten the feeling of being watched, even when he was alone. Was it a figment of his imagination or something far more sinister? We may never know. But one thing's for sure, Mark's story is a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying things are the ones we can't explain.
Our third story comes from a woman named Emily who lived in an apartment on the third floor of a seemingly ordinary building. But one night, something happened that changed her life forever. It started with a knock at her door at exactly 3 a.m. Emily was a light sleeper, so the sound of knocking woke her instantly. She glanced at the clock. 3 a.m. Who could be knocking at this hour? She crept to the door, her heart racing, and peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty. She waited, holding her breath, but the knocking didn't come again. She told herself it was just a dream and went back to bed. The next night, it happened again. Same time, 3 a.m., same knock, slow, deliberate, almost patient. This time, Emily didn't look through the peephole. She called the police, but by the time they arrived, the knocking had stopped. They found no one in the building, no evidence of an intruder, just silence. The knocking continued every night for a week, always at 3 a.m., always the same rhythm. Emily started to lose sleep, her nerves frayed. She installed a security camera outside her door, but it captured nothing. No one was there. And then one night something changed. The knocking wasn't at the door anymore, it was coming from inside her apartment. Emily froze, her blood turning to ice. The sound was coming from her closet. She grabbed her phone and called the police, but as she waited, the knocking grew louder, more frantic. When the police arrived, they found Emily huddled in the corner of her living room, shaking. They searched the apartment but found nothing. No one in the closet. No explanation for the knocking. Emily moved out of the apartment the next day. She never found out what or who was knocking. But to this day, she refuses to live anywhere with a closet, and she always sleeps with the lights on.
Our final story comes from a couple, Jake and Lisa, who moved into their dream home in the countryside. It was peaceful, secluded, and perfect until they realized they weren't alone. This is the story of the shadow in the window. It started with small things. Lisa would see movement out of the corner of her eye, but when she turned, there was nothing there. Jake would hear faint scratching sounds outside their bedroom window at night. They told themselves it was just the wind or animals, but then one night, Lisa saw it. A shadowy figure standing outside their kitchen window, staring in. Lisa screamed, and Jake ran to the window, but the figure was gone. They searched the property but found nothing. No footprints, no signs of an intruder, just the eerie feeling that they were being watched. The incidents continued. Footsteps on the porch, whispers in the dark, and always the shadow in the window. One night, Jake decided to set up a camera facing the window. What he captured still haunts them to this day. The footage showed the shadowy figure standing there, motionless for hours. But the most chilling part, the figure wasn't outside the window, it was inside the house, reflected in the glass. Jake and Lisa moved out immediately. They never found out who or what the shadow was, but they still can't shake the feeling that it followed them, because sometimes, late at night, they see it, a dark shape, standing just outside their new home, watching. Was it a ghost, a stalker, or something else entirely? We may never know. But one thing's for sure, Jake and Lisa's story is a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying things are the ones we can't explain. Lock your doors tonight. You never know who or what might be watching.